following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another episode of Oshkosh Diaries. I'm Paul Esslinger, joined by co-host Derek Kloiber. Today we have another great program for you, another interesting person. This gentleman is a local historian, author, has authored books, and he's a lifetime resident of Oshkosh outside of some military time that he spent, and he's got a couple stories about the military, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but for now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Metz. Jim, thanks for sitting down and talking to us today.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, let's get started, Jim. Talking about Jim Metz back when he was very, very young. And where did you grow up in Oshkosh, Jim?
The far north side, in the Murdoch Avenue area, about 2 blocks from the old fairgrounds. So that was one place where we could play a lot. We played there were a lot of vacancies out there at that time. So you could have a ball field here, baseball, played football in another spot. Nearby there was a billboards in a semi-swamp of about 60 lots, I would say. And we fought more battles back there than the Japanese did in World War II.
Now you weren't considered in the Nordheim area then, were you? Or?
I was just south of Nordheim. The Nordheimers were considered pretty tough, so we never associated with them. When we got later on into school together, they weren't that tough. But for kids, that was the story. So there was no association between us.
Where did you learn personally that they were tough, or did the parents tell you that?
Not the parents. That was just
common knowledge.
Common knowledge among our kids.
What was life like in the house growing up? A little bit about your parents, maybe how you were raised.
Well, I think all parents back then were more strict than they are today. My parents were relatively strict, but not horrendously so. We
got away with a little bit sometimes.
We had freedom to spread our wings. For instance, going back to the billboards was about 4 or 5 blocks away at the time. When we were old enough, that was allowed to us. We just had to come home when we heard the factory whistles.
Sure.
And all too frequently, we didn't hear the factory whistles. And then we'd catch hell.
Sure.
Late for supper again. We're lucky we saved Jenny.
Now, some of the other guests, Jim, you were born in, I think, 1930, thereabouts?
1930,
1930. Some of the other people that we've had on said that, home life was tough. They didn't have running water, electricity, dirt floors. How were you raised?
We were in much better condition. We had a refrigerator, which was unusual in the neighborhood. Most of them had ice boxes. And of course, we loved to traipse along after the ice truck and get
shavings
of ice to munch on. But at our house, we didn't have the card in the window because we had a refrigerator. The control or the mechanics of the refrigerator were in the basement and tubes up to the kitchen.
Interesting.
Did that require a lot of servicing?
No.
Pretty reliable even then, huh?
Yeah.
What was your first recollection of the refrigerator? What year do you think that had been?
Well, we always had it in our house.
Always had it.
Always had it.
That was pretty much a luxury, wasn't it?
Sort of. Luxury, well, cutting edge more than
Okay.
luxury. I
Well,
think they understood this was coming.
right. Talk about your siblings, if you had any, and where are they
yeah.
doing now? Are you still keep in contact with them?
Oh, yeah. You laugh because you know Ron. my
Yeah, I
younger
know your brother, right?
And my older brother is Tom. There were the three of us boys. All three of us eventually ended up in the Army. I was drafted. They were enlisted. But they're still around, which was doing pretty well. My parents died at 62 for my dad, my mother, and 52 for my dad. And so for the three siblings to make it into their 80s is remarkable. We get together once in a while. Tom lives in rural Winneconne.
Okay.
And Ron, of course, lives in Oshkosh when he's not recreating in Florida.
Down in Florida, yeah, right. Well, how was the? Were you the youngest, the middle, or the old? You
I
were
was
the
middle.
old- You were in the middle.
That has advantages and disadvantages.
What are the advantages?
The younger always looked up to the oldest, not to the older. So I was skipped over in some regard. Plus the fact I was a lousy sports
You weren't an
person.
athlete.
I was not an athlete. I got around to sports later through refereeing, but I was not able to keep up with any of them. And Ron could play a relatively decent game of basketball. Tom was very much a baseball player. He coached a Legion team in Green Bay for like, I think 40 years. It was very sports oriented. I was not.
Okay.
You mentioned born and raised in Oshkosh. What schools did you attend? And you said not so much into the sports. Maybe what were you into in school activities and such?
Activities, none. Scholarship, a little bit.
Sure.
But I developed an interest in history back in grade school. I read all the books in the library in Merrill School, by the way. I read all the books in the library they had on Lincoln. And I just kept growing from there, reading whatever I could about the Civil War. But he grabbed me as a third or fourth grader, and I've tried to stay with history ever since. I have.
I know we'll get into that a little later about some of the books you've written and such. So that seed of history was planted way back then.
Yes.
As a grade schooler.
Yes.
How neat. How
Well, on that point, Jim, when you were young, growing up in the 40s, generally, did you even look at Oshkosh how it was back in the 1800s? Did that have an effect on you when you were a kid?
Not when I was a kid, no. That came, well, a little bit. My grandma was a survivor of the of big fires. The last fire was a trauma for her, so it was talked a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Okay. So then what did you do for fun as a kid? Well, our other guests talked about various forms of mischief they were in and or not.
Well, I don't know if the statute has played out yet. No, I didn't get into troubles or nothing. I didn't have my nose in a book all the while. But when they would choose up sides, I was there, of course. If I was the odd man, that meant, okay, you can referee. So I got into the refereeing part.
Okay.
Fairly young. My mother was a great Oshkosh All-Star fan, and she taught me the rudiments of refereeing, which is an odd way of coming by that knowledge, but it was Ma who kind of put me on that path.
So, kind of with your mom and dad again, did they rule kind of with the iron fist like they did back in the day?
Not iron fist.
Maybe a velvet?
Well, if we had really earned it, Pa would whale us with a paddle.
Right.
But we earned it. It was not just a passion sudden that to hit me. In fact, Ma would say, "You wait till your dad gets home.
Yeah.
He's going to give you the paddle," and she told him, and he did.
So by and large, mom and dad were respected and listened to. You listened to them.
Yeah, and if all else failed, we listened after the paddling.
You learned a lesson, I suppose, huh?
Yeah.
As far as Oshkosh, when you were a kid growing up, even maybe in your teenage years, how do you remember it, particularly the downtown?
Well, downtown was downtown. There is no such thing left around anymore.
Sadly.
Malls don't take that place.
Right.
Downtown was downtown. And for us growing up, particularly because high school was nearby, so we were downtown frequently on school days, everybody gravitated to the dime stores. There were Kresge, Woolworth, and Newberry.
Now, for the younger
all
kids,
in a row.
what is a dime store, Jim?
It's where you buy stuff for a nickel or a dime.
It's
Or
absolutely hard to
thereabouts.
imagine these days, but
Yeah, it's even then they were exceeding the dime limit, but it was paying very little for what is essentially cheap stuff. But they often did the job, or usually did the job, and so you could buy toys very cheap. They didn't last long, but they were cheap. Or also clothing, underwear, socks, cheap stuff, but they did the job.
well, we still have. I mean, we have basically the same concept today. We have the dollar stores now. But
That concept has come back with the
Right.
dollar stores.
Right.
And,
so, when did the dime stores kind of go out, if you remember?
well, when they were torn down.
Yeah.
The dime stores had one thing the dollar store does not have, and that was normally a soda fountain. So that was a place where kids congregated a great deal. I know Kresge's had a donut making machine, which people would watch the donuts being made and buy them, and believe me, they were fresh. You saw them frying. That kind of stuff you don't get in dollar stores now. A little more to a dime store than to a dollar store.
So, I'll take this one. Just compare and contrast Oshkosh from Jim's teenage years to now. Is it, obviously we live in the same city, but is it the same, Jim?
No, the Oshkosh that I lived in back then was a cohesive Oshkosh. Now, generally for good, it's expanded so much, and the things have become more diverse. The big thing that's lacking is a cohesive shopping area. But you can get most of the stuff you need in Oshkosh from
Right.
what's here. You have to travel further. You can't just walk from Kresge's to Newberry's.
No.
Right. Safe to say, though, back in the day, downtown was a one-stop shop for everything, pretty much.
Well, it wasn't one stop, but you stopped at a lot of places. Henderson Hoyt was the department store, and it was covered everything you needed in dry goods. There were quite a number of clothing stores downtown, from the Continental of happy memory, Cease Hall, and the list goes on and on of men's clothing stores, women's dress stores were down there, undergarments, girdles as they were known back
Yeah.
in certain happy days. They were all down there. You got to go all over now look for a girdle.
Side of the town.
Yeah.
As you got older, when you were old enough to work, what were some of the jobs you decided to obtain?
The only thing I did was took my paper out. My older brother had it, and when I turned 12, I got the route. And I stayed with it till I was about 18, and I got part-time. I was still in high school, and high school downtown, of course, so you could get over there easily. So I went to the Northwestern and was taking the papers off of the press for about 6 months. I did that, worked around the press room during the press run. And when we reached graduation, there was an opportunity to become a reporter, a cub reporter, and I took it. And I stayed there ever after until I was 65.
Okay. Well, we got a couple minutes before we have to take a break, Jim. Yeah. Ultimately, you were in the newspaper business for a career, correct? You're
Yes.
at Oshkosh Northwestern. Why don't you take a minute or two and just talk about that and when you retired?
Okay, well, you start off as a reporter, a cub reporter, as they termed it, and gradually worked up into more important things to cover. I was a reporter for several years. I'd even tried sports writing for a little while, but I didn't like that. Then I became, I think, state editor, which is, running the bureaus. We had bureaus out Wautoma, Berlin, Ripon, and running those with the people who were working at that. And that I lasted for a number of years. Then I became city editor, which is the height of power in the newsroom. Mm-hmm. The day-to-day running of the reporters and photographers to cover the day's news, and you had to have a mind for what is happening and get the reporters to the important places. Then I don't know the date, but I became editorial page editor. That is simply writing the editorials for the day. I did that, I'm sure, for 20 years. I retired in '95, which is when I turned 65. So 20 to 25 years before, prior to that, I was doing the editorials. I had to go back the other day to see some of my old editorials because my granddaughter in Virginia asked for examples of what I wrote. So I had to relive some of that.
Any other positions? That was the highest you were?
That was the highest.
And what year did you finally retire then, Jim?
95, November 95.
1995.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, Jim, we're gonna take a short break. Jim was in the military outside of his life here in Oshkosh, and he was on a rather famous boat, and we'll talk about that when we get back. So stay tuned.
On the surface, the simple pleasures in life are going on all around us. But inches beneath the surface, utility lines are carrying electricity, gas, and more to your home. Digger's Hotline helps avoid costly or dangerous mistakes. It doesn't matter how deep you're digging. Call 811 or click diggershotline.com 3 working days before you start your project, and we'll help take the risk out of digging. Protect your simple pleasures. Know what's below.
There is a place where history is captured in time, where the voices of past generations still discuss the days of success, of love, hope, and joy. Timeless, playful,
Welcome to my attic.
memorable. The Oshkosh Public Museum. Come for the sights, stay for the memories.
Welcome back to Oshkosh Diaries. I'm Paul Esslinger, joined with co-host Derek Kloiber. Today we're talking with Jim Metz, local historian. We're going to talk a little bit about the military time that Jim had, and he was on a famous boat, and we'll have actually a picture of that a little bit later. So let's talk about the military a little bit, Jim.
Okay. I alluded to it before. My 2 brothers joined. I was drafted. It was a Korean-era war. I ended up in Germany rather than Korea. They went over to Korea, which serves them right, I suppose, for enlisting. But I was in Germany for a year and a half or better. And you want to? Have we got the?
Yeah, we'll have the photo in a little bit.
Okay. Well, I was assigned to the Judge Advocate General's Corps headquarters in Heidelberg, and we had a bigwig come. He was the number 2 Judge Advocate of the Army, and so they decided to throw a big party, and they they got the Navy to bring Hitler's yacht over, and they got on there, and they had a lot of room. So they let us enlisted men on too. So I rode the Rhine River on Hitler's yacht. It was in 1952, I believe it would be. The Navy has since sunk the yacht in the Caribbean. You'll never see the likes of that one again. But
Wow.
the stateroom had wood inlays, a map of Germany showing the initiated, the important things of Nazi rising in Germany at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a different experience.
Okay. Well, Jim, let's take a little bit and talk about your family, your wife, kids, if you want to take a little while.
Oh, sure. She'll probably watch, so I better.
Cover your bases there, yeah.
Yeah, my wife is Violet. She's a native Oshkoshian. Her family's been in Oshkosh for 100 years. Mine has been for 150, so I lord that over her.
Right.
We have 4 kids: Edward, Andrea, the daughter, the sole daughter, Paul, and Richard. Eddie is the chief librarian of the FEMA's fire
Division?
division. He's in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Andrea has a sandwich not submarine. It's firehouse subs in Richmond. Paul is a prison guard when he's not in the Army. He's in the federal prison at Oxford. And Richard lives in Oshkosh, and he's a state prison guard at Fox Lake.
Okay. And you do have one granddaughter, Emma, right? That my
Well,
my
yeah,
daughter
yeah,
actually-
Emma is
Richard's
and,
daughter.
Richard's daughter, and yeah, she knows Sydney.
Right. Okay. Well, we got some pictures. Control room, if you want to bring up these pictures. Jim's got some pictures of various pictures of his life, and the first one is when he was very young. Jim, who is that?
That's me in 1931, but look at that buggy.
Yeah.
Isn't that class? And all the buggies were that way.
That's
It's
very
wicker
nice.
and very ornate.
Right. Okay. Next picture.
Here I was about 4 years old at my grandma Metz's house. She's the one who was worried about the fifth grade fire.
Okay. All right. Next picture.
That's the three of us boys. Tom at the top, Ron on the right, and me sitting in the middle, as if I'm refereeing there.
Or being scolded or something. I'm not quite sure. Okay. Next picture.
That would be me at college age. I went to St. Paul Seminary, and that would have been at that era.
Okay. Next picture.
That was me at the high school graduation year.
That's high school graduation. That'll be 49, 48?
Well, the picture was shot in 48, yeah.
48,
I
okay.
graduated in January 49.
Okay. All right. Next picture.
That's old-ish in the barracks in Indiantown Gap Military Reservation, Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. Next picture.
There's me on Hitler's yacht.
Now that's Hitler's. Yeah. What
Yeah.
is that? Is it a painting, a drawing, or whatever?
No, that's inlay.
Oh, that's the
wood.
inlay.
That's inlay, yeah.
Oh my lord.
Beautiful Zurich work.
And this is when you were in the military. So this had been what about 52? Did you say?
52 probably, yeah.
Okay. All right. That's an excellent
Yeah.
photo.
Well, that's me when I was a basketball referee. A fairly good one.
Okay. Next picture.
And this is me in my failing years as a soccer referee.
Oh.
The fellow I'm with there I was also an instructor in refereeing for 20 years.
Okay.
And he was my star pupil.
Who's the fellow there?
Dan Bean is his name. He is qualified to referee international matches.
Oh.
He started off under me in Oshkosh.
Okay. All right.
A
And
whale of a referee.
I think we got one more, if I remember right.
Oh, there, yeah. Welcome to Oldisleben. That's where the Metz family originated. We left there in about 1854. My son, when he was stationed in Germany, we visited him, and we went. This was in East Germany, so it was newly opened to the West. So we took advantage and went to see Oldisleben. There are no more Metzes left there.
Really?
There's one family with the same name as my great-great-grandfather's in-laws, but I have no idea if they're related.
Okay. All right. Derek, you have a question?
So, like Paul and I, you're a member of the Oshkosh Memorabilia Club, actually, and president, right?
I'm president, yeah.
So, what got you into that? And just share a little bit about that.
I tell Paul, I'm not just into it, I founded it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I founded it. I was on the museum board at the time, and we had a series of articles for their quarterly on various things. And I thought, gee, one topic would be people who collect. Now, I knew my brother Ron collects. He's got thousands of postcards, Oshkosh, and a bunch of other things of Oshkosh. But I knew that he knew other people who collected. So we got together, and I interviewed all the collectors that we could find for this article. And the collectors decided, hey, we should get together monthly, and they have. So I don't collect Oshkosh memorabilia, I collect collectors. But it's done well, it's taking off.
For those of the viewers who don't know exactly, how long has that club been around, approximately?
8 to 10 years, I think, probably.
Yeah. Well, Jim, is it important that people know the history of Oshkosh? I know the answer to that, but why is it important?
Oh, yeah, well, you're a memorabilia club. Well, precisely because what happened in the past kind of reflects on what's happening now and into the future. We're condemned to make the mistakes, as they say, if we don't pay attention to what went on. But more, it's every community has an interesting story to tell. Every town, every city. Oshkosh has its own story, and it's really worth telling. I think a little more so than many, because there's a continuum of events, especially, we'll get around to it, I think, the great fires of Oshkosh. And then what Oshkosh attracts, for instance, now is the AA. It also attracts Inland Lake Yachting Association almost every 4 years. It's a good place, and things are happening. And if you get a sense of they're happening, you get a sense of being important to your community, I think.
I agree, Jim. You know, Oshkosh gets compared all the time to our cities to the north, to the south, and to the west and east, I guess. Do you think Oshkosh, would you not agree, has a better history? I mean, the history of Oshkosh is phenomenal.
Yeah. Neenah and Menasha have some interesting history. They were founded by brothers. That's one of the, as brothers don't get together, I suppose that's why Neenah and Menasha never got together. But Oshkosh's history, especially because of the fires, is unique. We are different from they because we had the placid waters that would bring down the logs to be logged here. They had and have the water power from the falls that made the paper industry practical for them. But we were here because of the waterway. We are because of the waterway.
What about Oshkosh history do you like the best? If there was one particular subject matter that you like the best about it?
Well, obviously, I like the fires era the best. I have a book called Oshkosh Aflame. That's also available on eBay now. That covers the entire history of Oshkosh through its era of fires and near fires. The fears that the next one will happen, and eventually the gradual growth of fire equipment and service that prevented it from happening. It all makes an interesting story.
I know Paul's going to get into that about your books in the next question. I've actually read your Oshkosh Aflame. It's a great book, and it's kind of neat about that. There's some other interesting little things you put in there that are somewhat non-fire related, but some particularly gruesome ends to some early citizens.
Not the fellow in the soap.
Yes, that's who I'm thinking about.
Well, at that time we were discussing what in the book. We're discussing what's happening to Oshkosh and what's grabbing their attention, and that certainly did. His name was Soper, wasn't it?
Soper or Loper or
Loper,
something?
Loper, I think. He may still be there where BMO Harris is.
Well, explain the story. What are you talking about, Jim?
Well, Loper had a soap factory, huge vats of material, and he was working on a Sunday, I believe, and fell into the vat. There was nobody there to get him out, so he just cooked with the soap. And because obviously you didn't want to sell that soap,
No.
they poured it out roughly where BMO Harris is now. I assume that it's all gone, but parts of Soper may still be there. I don't know. A Loper, man.
And when was that? When did that take place, Jim?
Oh, 1880s maybe.
1880s.
Something like that.
Okay. Well, looking back in history, Jim, of the vast knowledge that you have of all the people and events that went on, is there someone or something that you really admire, that maybe pulled you up from, when you're a kid that you looked at favorably or, steered you in the direction of being who you are?
Not really. Miss Sherman was the librarian at Merrill School, and she got me to check out the books, but I can't think of anybody right now that no single individual was going to be blamed for who I am.
Okay, we're going to take a break here in another minute or two. Are there any other city activities? You're obviously the person that started the Memorabilia Club. Whether it be now or, years ago, what, you frog around with anything else?
No, I write a column for the quarterly paper of the Winnebago County Historical and Archaeological Society. I'm going to have a collection of those out in a book in about a couple of months. But that keeps me digging for things to write about. And the society does quite a job. I don't know if you've had anybody from there yet or not.
I don't think so.
If you get around to history, that's not bad. Julie Johnson, for one.
Right.
But that's where my activity is now.
Okay.
It's tapered off, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're going to take one more break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss maybe a little more in detail the major fires that hit Oshkosh back in the 1800s. And Jim's going to talk about his favorite side of Main Street, which was the 5-cent side of Main Street. So when we come back, we'll discuss those issues. Stay tuned.
What I always found interesting about the paper years ago is how
On the surface, the simple pleasures in life are going on all around us. But inches beneath the surface, utility lines are carrying electricity, gas, and more to your home. Digger's Hotline helps avoid costly or dangerous mistakes. It doesn't matter how deep you're digging, call 811 or click diggershotline.com 3 working days before you start your project, and we'll help take the risk out of digging. Protect your simple pleasures. Know what's below.
There is a place where history is captured in time, where the voices of past generations still discuss the days of success, of love, hope, and joy. Timeless, playful,
Welcome to my attic.
memorable. The Oshkosh Public Museum. Come for the sights. Stay for the memories.
Welcome back to Oshkosh Diaries. Derek and I are talking to Jim Metz, local historian, and I guess all-around good guy. Jim, we talked a little bit about the major fires, and you wrote Oshkosh Aflame. Talk about the major fires. From the first, there were 3 major fires.
There were 5.
5.
Five.
Okay.
Well, the first major fire was major because it burned down only 3 blocks of Main Street, but at that time, those 3 blocks accommodated every business there was in Main Street. Every businessman was wiped out that day. I can't remember the date. 1859 at some time. The second great fire was several years later, and again it burned several blocks, not quite the whole thing, but up Algoma Boulevard south for 2 blocks, and on the other side of the street, on the other side of Main Street. So again, a whale of a share of Oshkosh business was wiped out. The third fire was the first fire that began in the Wood area, and that was down near the Sioux Line Bridge today. That burned from the river on up for about 3 blocks to Algoma Boulevard, wiping out a couple of factories and workers' houses, and then some better houses up on Algoma Boulevard before it was put out. That was a little more extensive in the cost of destruction. Then that same year, in 1874, a few months later, a fire broke out in a shed which is back of Kitson File power equipment today, and that raced north across Division Street, of course, out Main Street, across Main Street there, wiped out the entire blocks of Main Street. In fact, there were factories and houses along there all the way to Irving, and on the other side of the road it crossed Jefferson, eventually crossed Mount Vernon? Oh. What's the next one over? Jefferson, I think Mount Vernon.
It's Jefferson and Mount Vernon.
Yeah. And it burned south northeastward up until about Sterling Avenue, and it got to the railroad track, and there was nothing else to burn. That's how long it was. About 500 people were dispossessed of their housing.
Oh my God.
That 500 houses. That's more than 1,000 people were stuck without a
Residents.
place. Yeah.
I know in your book you have lists at the back of the people who suffered the losses,
Yeah.
and some of these people suffered multiple losses over different fires.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was the 4th fire, yeah. The 5th fire began again near the in the Wood area, in the Morgan Doors, raced eastward, wiped out all of Main Street almost between Algoma and Marion. There's a little bit left there. Crossed Main, went across to Washington, to CP, all the way down to beyond Bowen, where it finally petered out. Again, even more people were dispossessed of their home, but so many more were dispossessed of their business, their property. You bring up those who suffered quite frequently in the back. It brings me to Baby Doe and her family. The one who suffered more fire damage than any other person in Oshkosh was her dad, Peter McCourt. He was burned out in 3 Oshkosh fires. He was burned out in 2 other fires that were confined to a few buildings down there. But each time he came back bigger, each time he came back better. That was typical of Oshkosh businessmen. They came back better. After the first fire, for instance, that worked up to Algoma Boulevard, the end of the business era, after that the business people moved further north, many of them, so that the next fire was not wiping out all of the business people again. But we're talking about McCourt wasn't the only one who suffered damages in multiple times, but he suffered the most. And that brings me to why I wrote a book.
Yeah, why would you write the book?
I wrote a book about Baby Doe Tabor, who is Peter McCourt's daughter. Now, in each of these things, she learned to come back, not to be defeated, just like Papa would not be defeated. She learned not to be defeated by anything that happened to her. Well, Lizzie McCourt went out and married Harvey Doe. That's where the Doe of Baby Doe comes. And moved out west to the Colorado mining areas. Well, Harvey was not a winner. He was soft. He had 4 daughters, 4 sisters who doted on him and took care of him. So he was pretty soft. Well, Baby had robust bringing up. Her closest siblings were boys. She was a tough one. So she divorced Harvey within, 3 or 4 years. And then she stayed out there, and she set her cap on finding somebody who would provide her with the fine things that mining could provide. And she hatched onto Horace Tabor. Well, Horace was about 30 years older than she and was already married. But she was more alluring than Augusta Tabor, and so Horace divorced Augusta and married Baby. And they were living the life of Riley, to quote an Irish expression. And then the silver bubble burst, and Horace was broke again. Horace was broke completely. Everybody said, well, Baby will toss him over. There are people out there that have the money to see that she's taken care of according to our customs. But she was in love with the man. She absolutely thought of nothing else but Horace Tabor. Poor, we're going to be rich again if we work at it. We're going to. So they struggled along, and he, of course, up and died. He was older than she, as I said. And she went down to the mine one of the mines that Horace had worked for a great deal of his silver. It was called the Matchless Mine. And she tried for the next 30 years to bring it around. She would, when she was able, she would dig herself. She would try to hire people who would work it, and there was nothing there. She died in 1935, essentially penniless, but she had essentially been true to Horace for all those years. It was after she was dead that people started realizing how steadfast she really was. It makes a good story.
Yeah. Jim, before we went to break, we talked, I teased the people with the 5-cent side.
Oh my, yes.
Let's inform the folks what the 5-cent side was.
Anybody ever find a beer for 5 cents?
Not
you
like
could on the 5-cent side. That's where the name came from, of course.
This is on Main Street.
It was the east side of Main Street, and not all the taverns. A good many of the taverns were on the east side of Main Street, roughly from CP up. I don't know if it got much past Washington or not. But you could pack a lot of taverns into that area.
Right.
And at 5 cents a glass, you could hang one on real neat. And of course, when the lumbering men were coming down early in their careers from the forests, they were spending 5 cents is like where it's going out of style. And people, Oshkosh people just stayed away. The newspapers used to carry just a brief note. The first men from the camps were seen in Oshkosh today, and that told everybody, stay away, stay home if you have to. And the 5-cent side was taken over by the lumberjacks.
Well, now with all the lumberjacks there, had a lot of money, they were guys that would attract a certain element, would it not, Jim?
Well, they were there too, yes.
Yeah. And what kind of element would that attract, Jim? You're leaving out part of the story here.
The lesser element, it meant that no respectable Oshkosh woman would be seen on the 5-cent side. It immediately destroyed their reputation if they were over there. Even for a while, beyond the scope of the lumberjacks, you just didn't go there. Because there were lumber mill people going down there too. It's not as if the bartenders suffered for want of customers after the lumberjacks went home.
But I'm sure there were probably some younger ladies that visited the taverns over there.
Not the taverns. They all had stairways.
Stairways. Stairway to heaven, basically?
Something like that.
Something like
What
that.
are you trying to get me to say?
I don't. You're the historian, Jim, not me. I just reported accurately. You're the reporter. You're the historian. I just wanted you to report it accurately. That's all.
That's accurate, and that's why a respectable Oshkosh woman would never be seen any time of the year on the 5-cent side.
Okay. We're down to like about 2, maybe 3 minutes tops, Jim, and then Derek and I have a couple announcements. Back to the fires. Okay, you have 5 fires.
Yeah.
I think it begs the question, you've heard the saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. After the second, the third fire, why were we having so many fires? Is there something we were doing wrong, or?
No, the firefighting equipment was not good, and it hadn't been invented yet. They all started in a different spot from a different cause. The third fire that started on the river, probably caused by sparks from a passing steamboat.
Oh,
And that was, you couldn't do much about that.
yeah.
The fourth fire, they never did say the cause. It's the one on the starting back of Kitson File Power. There was a rumor that kids were smoking a cigar and dropped it, but that was denied in the next day's paper, and they never did have a cause of it.
Okay.
The fifth fire was a beginning from the smokestack of one. It was a windy day. That's why it got all the way to Bowen. A very windy day, and all the places were down. All the mills were down except Spalding and Peck, and for some reason they were operating, and smoke, sparks from their stack. They lower the fire during a lunch hour, and then they hurry it up to get a big steam, head of steam going right away. Well, that's where the sparks fly, and the sparks flew from Spalding and Peck onto the Morgan Mill lumber, and that's where that started.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, Jim, we're just flat out of time. I had another 3-4 questions here on the fires. Unfortunately,
Yep.
I have to ask you when we're done here. But, well, thank you, Jim, for coming here on behalf of myself and Derek. It's a pleasure having you here. And,
Absolutely.
And looking forward to seeing you at some meetings and hopefully the appraisal show, which Derek and I are going to talk about. But before that, Derek's got an announcement to make.
Last episode, I mentioned our 2 new Facebook pages that we have going. Oshkosh Diaries is the first one. That's our Facebook page for this show, where you can catch all the episodes have been uploaded to YouTube. So go on there, comment away, share your constructive thoughts, and the membership just keeps growing daily. So that's Oshkosh Diaries on Facebook. Our second group is Oshkosh Memories. Amazing pictures there, stories, people sharing their memories. Again, that's growing daily. So keep it up, keep posting those photos, and Ida, our production manager, is doing an excellent job of moderating and administrating that. So thank you to Ida. That's all I have, so Paul, take it away.
Okay, as I mentioned in the last show, we are having an antique appraisal show, and that appraising items that are either manufactured in Oshkosh or were for Oshkosh businesses, and that will be March 29th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., and that will be over at the Senior Center. That's the Annex building. That's the North building, and we'll be there, Derek, myself, and we'll get Jim. We'll make sure Jim's over there. So if you have any questions about the fires in Oshkosh, he does have that book that he published, so maybe we can bring some of those down there, and those will be available. We appraise brewery items, pictures, milk items, toys, postcards, yearbooks, and we love to hear stories. So hope we can see you down there March 29th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Check your closets and attics.
Check the
Bring
closets,
stuff in.
attics, crawl spaces, and
Yep.
grandma's and grandpa's house. So with that, unfortunately, we're out of time, but tune in again next time for another episode of Oshkosh Diaries. Thank you.